was to do it in the early days. We started off, we had to get the tractor from the farmer to actually lift the beast up to be able to gut it. We're thinking, how are we going to do this? Then it moved to, we got to the other end of the box. We had to somehow get it into the box. Same again, we had to get a tractor to lift it in. So very, very early days, this is I think one of the first or second year that we went into the box. All was done by a tractor. So then we came up with some ideas where Ian came up with the idea of designing a crane that goes on the back. We bought a kangaroo rack from up north and readapted it, work out a crane system so you can actually load it by yourself. And that's a picture of my daughter, so she's loading that stag by herself now. So there's no effort involved, the system's all there now. So as we said before, the field harvesters that are accredited undergo strict, intense training, so they've got to have firearms accuracy and also handling. They've got to go through a meat handling course with open tape. All these different modules can take up to 6 months from start to finish, and it's not a cheap option. So that's what we had to do when we did open tape. We had to do the apply hygienes and sanitary practice, overview of wild game, harvest, how to operate a harvest vehicle, and even it down to sharpening knives. Then you've got to set up a rack. So all this is starting to add up. Like if you knew what you were getting into when you first started, you probably have second thoughts, but it's easy to burn 50 or 60 grand by the time you get set up. So in the early days, Prime Safe hadn't quite set themselves up to how to handle meat, and they didn't have all their processes in place. So what happened was that the New South Wales side had been doing it for years and years at Australian standard, and Prime Safe based all their new legislation off that. So now there's mutual recognition between both states, a bit like your car licence, where you can use a Victorian car licence and drive in New South Wales. So if you're in Victoria and supplying to Victoria, you've got to have registration with Prime Safe. And you can't, no one can just go out and shoot here and then drop them off at, say, Victorian Abs or Wild Game Resource or any others. You've got to have those accreditations in place with the rack and also the accreditation as a meat harvester. You've got to go through firearms testing. Now that was interesting. We put like 157 shooters through courses, and out of that there was some strange things that went on. Like some blokes were shooting other people's targets, guys would turn up to the range and had to shot their guns in. It's like, this for real? So out of that you'd only pick the best of the shooters that could be then ongoing harvesting. Just a quick one there, that's the Wild Game Act Code of Conduct. Also, you've got to be compliant with all the laws. You've got to maintain your public liability of $10 million for each person. When we shoot for parks and delta, that's got to be 20 million, so that goes up. And we only purchase from accredited shooters. So that's a little bit of a thing on the processing line. So that's all done to Australia. Everything we process has to be at human consumption level. And then after that, they can downgrade that and put it off to pet food. But if we send stuff over to the States, it's all got to be at human consumption level. And even when they feed to their dogs and the cats in the States, it's got to be human consumption grade. And anyone can pick up one of those things and eat it, and you wouldn't be breaching any laws. So it's just part of the international orders. It's got to be the human consumption level. As I say, it was all that innovation all the time. When we first started out, the thermal gear was good. We thought it was fantastic. When I was doing a few of the presentations, I looked back at some of the old footage I'd taken compared to the stuff we're using now. It's like, oh my goodness. You don't realise how far it's come in a short time. So with the thermal optics, obviously suppressed weapons and thermal drone we've been playing around with, that is just a game changer. And obviously the retrieval winches, the high-speed retrieval winches as well. So if you shoot a deer and it's 200 metres that way and it's up in through a blackberry gully, we've got winches now that can run out the back. And it's not just a normal winch where it pulls a car out, it's a high-speed winch, so it drags it back within like 1 or 2 minutes. That's just a little bit of I don't know whether everyone's probably seen thermal gear, but this is just a mum and a pup. Nothing gets shot, you won't be seeing any animals getting hit, but that's just the quality of the optics that's coming out now and the clarity you can see.
What distance away is there?
This one here, probably 30 metres, 40 metres. So this one here was we're working on a contracting job for parks, and if they were 3 metres that way, we could have shot them, but they were just outside of there. We might as well film them. That's just a little bit of an indication of the drone. See 3 deer there. And that can cover such a big area, and as Stephen said before, you can look in a gully and work out, is it worth having a look at this? No. 2 minutes you've got the drone up, you can move on to the next area, there's nothing there. The same again, you see the clarity, these are the cameras that are on the drone. So benefits to landholders, and we've got Hugh Trapp, he's come from farmer and bidder, so we're going to talk to Hugh later on. I'll just encourage you to ask him any question, because he's going to be brutally honest with you what he thinks of the whole process. He got involved in the early days, and so ask him as many questions as you like. So these are some benefits to landholders. That yes, you know that if you're engaging wild game resources, you've got a level of shooters that are sort of top notch. They're bound by that code of conduct. They've got to be professional in all their dealings. They're not going to leave gates open, the stock's not going to get out. They're not going to tear up the paddocks. And each animal that we shoot, we attach a barcode system to, so it's tracked right through the system on that barcode. So if Ian shoots one on Hugh's place, we can put Hugh's pick code on there, and he's got his own tags that are in just to that shooter. So you can trace that animal right through the system to where it's processed and where it ends up, whether it ends up in the States or where the last place it will be. So the other benefit to landowners, which is probably the bottom line as well, is that wild game are paying 25 cents a kilo for all the animals that are taken off your property. So that goes through that bar system, so that the animal gets weighed in. So if it's 100 kilos, that animal's worth $25 to you on the rebate system. It comes back through straight to your bank account. So it's tracked by your PIN code, straight into your bank account, and away it goes. And we're probably the same. The quotas go up and down, and it's subject to international markets at the moment. Everyone's on hold and a bit nervous because the gas price has gone up. We've just got the letter that the electricity is going up another 20% after the 1st of July. The biggest thing that's impacting the international markets at the moment is the freight costs. So when we started shooting 4 years ago, the freight cost was around $2,500 a container. Pre-COVID, it was around that $3,500 a container. And then through that, it's jumped up to $9,000. And now it's sitting at $18,000 per container. But if you really want to guarantee that your product's going to get overseas, you can pay $26,000 and it'll get over there. So that's the difference in the costing that's happening at the moment. It's just enormous. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all goes for all the processes at the moment. And I imagine growing apps will be the same. There's just the cost and impact down the track. So there's another option. Wild game, there's no silver bullet with deer control. There's not one person that can do all it. When I went down to a Senate inquiry committee, they had all the senators there, and their task was to work out how to deal with the deer. And they said, well, you've got to shoot 400,000 deer a year just to keep the population the same. How are you going to do that? We can't shoot 400,000 deer a year. Even if you took all the rec hunters, and we might all still be up to 200,000-300,000. And they kept coming back, well, how are you going to shoot 400,000 deer a year? We can't shoot 400,000 a year. There is no silver bullet. There's so many different things involved. Everyone plays a part. All the different abattoirs and acrearies, they all play a part. The rec hunters, the ADA, sporting shooters, everyone needs to be involved in it. Parks, Delta. There's no, you can't just look at it and say it's all there to blame. It's all going to be part of the solution. Okay, a couple of questions. Are the shooters professional shooters insured while on the property? Yes. They have to maintain that $10 million public liability insurance. So if I'm on a property and I leave the gate open and the bull gets out and gets hit by a car, the farmer is covered under my insurance. Will the shooter notify me when he's on his property? Absolutely. It's a code, it's a condition of the code of conduct that you've got to let the landholder know if you're coming that night. Whether it be a text, and if you don't get a return text, you can't go. Could be a phone call, could be a text, could be an email, but there's got to be confirmation that the farmer knows you're on that property that night and has agreed to it. Can you still allow recreational shooters on the property? We say yes, by all means. So, say Reece wants to go and shoot on the property, we encourage it. If you stalk around during the day, they don't stir things up. The only thing we say, if you've got people spotlighting on there that night, if you can just let us know. Because if we go on the next night, everything's stirred up, and we might say, well, let's just leave it for 2 weeks and we'll come on there. But we encourage to get rec hunters on there by all means. Because the only one that really affects us is if someone's running around with a spotlight. Is the carcass removed? The only part of the animal that remains is the gut bag. The heart, lung and liver get taken away in the process and they have to be hung outside the animal. And we do get a few comments like, you see all these people driving around with deer on the back of their ute, they haven't covered them. Well, we're actually not allowed to cover them by law. We have to face them forward, they have to catch that wind in the chest cavity. So if you do see a load of deer, don't think, oh, why haven't they got a tarp over it? We're not allowed to tarp them. Is the process humane? Yep, every part of the process is humane. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Hugh. So, Hugh has had Ian for how many years now? Hugh has Ian shooting a mule?
Probably about 5 or 4.
5 years.
5, yeah.
So here's a perfect opportunity. So Hugh's got a farm up, and how many acres you got?
There's probably 500 or 600 acres that we own, but we own at least 3 other properties, or 2 other properties now actually, and all of them back on the bush. Over the years, we've got, mainly river flats, but it does go up to undulating country, and it all backs on the bush, and that's the problem actually. We had a hell of a lot of trouble with deer. It didn't matter how much you shot at them, really. When you go out, you might shoot 2 or 3, but the next time you went out, you'd probably do the same. But as they got more used to you, the spotlight, as soon as you turned it on, you had to be right on the game, otherwise they were gone. Like I've got one 10-acre paddock that I couldn't get any feed off in the winter. That was close to the bush. There was a couple other paddocks, but just this particular one those down. And I went up there one night and there was 26 deer in it.
10 acres. And 10 acres.
Yeah, but you'd say for 26 deer, that's probably they're going to come and go. But when you times it by 30 a month, that's 780, I think. Or 720. That's a lot of grazing, so that's why I wasn't getting any feed off it. And they were starting to encroach on our flood irrigation bay, so they'd come down during the night and the river flats. And we've got about a 5k dirt road from the place. And on any given night, you could see probably, anything from 1 to 8 or 10 on it, because they used to cross down and go on some roads we had. Since Ian's been involved and bred it, and they came up and, gave us a spiel, and I know most farmers are a little bit hesitant to let shooters on, but at the end of the day, nothing ventured, nothing gained, and we could go out any night and see 50 deer in a night, and we just couldn't not possibly control them. So they came on, they went through all the paperwork with us, and ever since then it's been just a great fit for us. I think the first year we and ourselves shot about 160, and after that, like Ian said, like Brett said, spotlighters, they do make them fairly wary. So we basically, unless we want to meet a animal, we keep it away, and they just come on. They ring us up before they come. They usually, Ian usually carries about a dozen, and that's about what he gets. He might have to travel on some of our, least country to get there, but I think the last time we came up, he got shot 17. And we don't see them on the road hardly ever anymore. I don't have a problem with them in grazing, our back paddies out. And at the end of the day, even the last time they came up, they put $450 in the bank. They didn't even have to get out of bed. So, and they are professionals. They don't leave gates open. They don't tear up your paddocks. The only thing is they'll leave a gut bags together. They're gone within 2 or 3 days with foxes and crows or the odd wedge-tailed eagle. It's been a great fit for us. We're never going to get rid of them, but they've maintained a level where we're happy with the processing. They're not causing us too much grief.
Have you noticed a difference in your feed?
Oh, absolutely. We're pushing them back in the bush, and every year, doesn't matter how many you shoot, they will be taken over by the next generation or the next ones that move further, out of the bush onto the, fringe country. So whatever Ian's going, we're pretty happy that we're here, problems being maintained. And at the end of the day, they are ethical in their shooting, and I don't ask much better than that. It's a great fit for anyone that wants to do it. Sometimes we don't get paid. I have no problem with that. You know, over the last 5 or 6 years, they've probably put in about $10,000 or $12,000 in the bank. Not bad outcome, I would have thought.
That's not bad.
No, look, I couldn't be happier, to tell you the truth. And, you know, like, they're never going to shoot them out, but they're certainly fixed my problem. So, that will also.
Excellent. Any questions for you? Well, here's a golden opportunity, 20 years it's farming.
Interesting, the insurance you're saying shooters need to have. So do they take that out personally? What sort of cost is that for them?
The insurance? Oh, anything between 600 and 1,000 a year it costs for the public liability. Yeah.
So that's fantastic if you're getting a couple of grand a year from it, which is basically their grazing, you're actually getting paid for your grazing, that might be adjustment to your deer adjustment, so.
Oh,
But how much money would the shooters make? What sort of?
Yeah, so it goes up and down. We've been paid from anything as low as 80 cents a kilo right up to $2.50 a kilo. At the moment it's sitting at $2 a kilo. But it goes up and down, and at the moment we're subject to quotas, and it's wound back a little bit just to see what this international market does. So, but yeah, it goes up.
Subject to quotas, what does that mean?
So wild game will process X amount a week, and they'll say 4, 5, 6, 10 shooters. They'll divvy up that tally between those 10 shooters. So you can shoot a tonne, or you can shoot half a tonne. That goes up and down. Or sometimes it's just open side. It's just we'll take as many as we can. But the thing I've noticed with this industry is probably the same as farming. The whole thing can change in one phone call. You get one international order come through, and then the next week will be, can you put in as many deer as possible? We've been in it for 4 years now, and it's gone up and down that 4 years.
So you're saying you're giving 25 cents a kilo to the landholder, and you're paying 65 cents a kilo for transport costs at the moment. That's at the moment for your freight overseas. So you're already up around 90 cents a kilo.
Yep.
You're only paying the shooter $2 a kilo. You're bordering on being uneconomical.
That's right. That's
That's really.
Yeah,
I shot commercially for Wild Game Resources back in the 90s, late 80s and early 90s, and where we're getting 45 cents a kilo for kangaroo meat for pet food and 55 for human consumption, and $1 a kilo for pigs over 45 kilo. And a small rise in the fuel price killed us. So, and you guys are there again.
Yep.
So
it goes up, even as a shooter, like now, you might have been paying $100 a trip for your fuel. Now it's $100.
now it's 150,
yeah.
$200.
Exactly. So
And that's your biggest cost is fuel, and then add vehicle maintenance into that as well.
But our argument is it's such a good. So.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I support it. I support it entirely. And what are you guys doing to push the usage of meat domestically?
Yeah, so there is
because that will offset what it's costing you to send it overseas.
So there is a brand. So we do everything that human consumption level.
Yep.
And out of that, they take some of the prime cuts of some of the animals if they're the right size kilo-wise, and they go into a brand called Discovered, which is a human consumption brand sold. Discovered. Yeah. So if you Google Discovered Foods, I think it's got the whole brand, and they sell to like restaurants and just the prime cuts. Just
yep.
the prime. So that would, and as that builds, that will offset, like you say, that will offset some of the costs of processing the animals.
That's where your money's going to be made, is the domestic market. Because the price of beef at the moment, I mean, not that I'm complaining about it, I've got cattle myself, but the price of beef at the moment, it's ridiculous. I don't eat beef, I eat venison because it's free.
It's getting more interest in the deer farms where they were all closed up. I think there's a few starting up again. So, and they're keen to supply the restaurants. But I love that the concept of wild harvest deer is just win-win, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's a win-win for everybody, wild harvest.
Pet foods domestically, can you do anything in that space?
Yeah, so Wild Game have just got into Aldi and Woolworths. So they've got like 16 lines in Woolworths and 8 or 9 lines in Aldi. So that's building.
What's that brand called?
But it's paddock to plate or something. It's cool. So they've got all these different brands that sit under the store. Yeah, but if you're looking at whatever you're looking at in Woolworths, they've got the biggest range now. I think it's paddock to plate or something like that.
Because that's great to promote too, isn't it? The pet foods, it makes sense, doesn't it?
And they've got the shoes as well.
Got the shoe.
Yeah, the antlers and the pigs.
Yeah, they buy the antlers off us and they turn those into dog chews, and I still can't get my head around how the dog can chew that and not break his teeth.
Chinese pay a fortune as aphrodisiacs. I have very randy dogs.
Wombats eat them.
It's interesting to say about the pigs, because the pigs now 70 cents, so they were $1 back in the day. The guy that he's worked at wild game for 38 years, he said the buyers would come out from Europe, and you know that bory smell. So you'd open the back of the chiller, and he'd be almost over the side reefing, and you smell it. And these buyers from Europe would be like, oh, the smell that is just beautiful.